Hi friends! Welcome back to another video. Today's video is really special to me because it's a travel vlog of my family vacation from last June where we visited Banff National Park for a week. As of now, this trip has been my absolute favorite of all time, so I'm really excited to take the time today to share all the wonderful things that we saw with you. The first day of our trip was mostly spent in transit to Canada. We flew from LaGuardia Airport into Calgary, and then from there, we took the bus to Canmore, which is where our hotel was. We decided to stay in Canmore because it's close enough to Banff to be convenient, but far enough away that it's not super touristy or expensive. To be honest, it was during the bus ride to Canmore that I really started to get super excited about the trip ahead because the ride was so scenic and our sightseeing hadn't even officially started yet. I loved how there was so much greenery and water, and as we got closer to our destination, I thought the snow-capped mountains were beautiful. I'm not even exaggerating when I say that when we arrived at Canmore and saw the snow-capped mountains up close, I thought, wow, heaven really is a place on earth. As a bonus, the temperature was also pleasantly cool and refreshing, especially compared to the sticky East Coast summer weather that we were experiencing back home. So overall, we had a great first day and we were all really happy to be there. The next day, we woke up bright and early and took the bus to Banff National Park. One thing I really liked was how easy the public transportation was between Canmore, the town of Banff, and Banff National Park. The signs were clearly labeled and the two towns were really walkable actually. Our first stop of both the day and the trip was Lake Louise. Words cannot describe how gorgeous this place was. I was amazed to see that the lake color was as vibrant as the photos, maybe even more so. We came early in the morning, so it wasn't too crowded, but we also didn't stay near the lakeshore for too long since we were planning on visiting Lake Louise again later on in the week. Instead, we started on the Lake Agnes trail, which starts at the lake shore and then ends at the Lake Agnes teahouse.
Oh, these are very soggy.
The trail was a bit strenuous because it takes you pretty far up the mountain and there were a lot of steep and sustained uphill portions. Fortunately, the paths were pretty well trodden, so I wasn't worried about falling or anything as we climbed higher and higher.
Is this a video? Yeah. It's gonna be so violating.
My dad's afraid of heights, so he ended up going back down partway through with my mom just to walk around the Lake Louise lakeshore. I found it funny that the point where my dad turned back ended up being the point where the trail actually got a lot easier and less scary for people who are afraid of heights. And during the second leg of the trek up, we saw some smaller attractions like other mountains, Mirror Lake, the big beehive, some waterfalls, and even little chipmunks. Lake Agnes itself was very beautiful and peaceful, and I enjoyed getting to just rest and watch the water for a bit before heading back down.
You have the lake first. It's so clear.
You think we steal the boat?
Steal it and take it where? Down the waterfall?
Yeah.
This will be fun, I'm sure. White water rafting. Let me see if I can touch it. You see the Bow River. It's very long, so.
Oh, we don't have to do the whole thing.
Yeah, I know, that's what I mean. It's like, it's closer now.
It's just coming closer and closer. Oh, maybe because it's sprinkling.
These are the biggest hail chunks I've ever seen.
Really?
Yeah, they're bigger than what I normally see. Usually they're pretty tiny.
Whoa, pretty colors. I also want to give a special shout out to the Fairview Lookout for somehow managing to be one of the hardest trails we walked during the whole trip, despite being one of the shortest, because it was basically 45 minutes of straight uphill at an almost 90-degree angle. The view was worth it because you get to see Lake Louise from on high, but it was a tough way up. This was also the trail where we had the most people who were heading up asking us how much farther or longer to go as we were heading back down. Our third day was spent exploring the Cave and Basin historic site. The museum was offering free admission for some reason when we went. I'm glad because I honestly didn't think what we saw inside was worth the normal admission fee. The cave basin itself was a little underwhelming because it was a basin in a cave that smelled overwhelmingly of rotten eggs because of the sulfur. It was also dark, warm, and a little humid, so it wasn't exactly the most refreshing experience.
They're really tiny, so it's hard to tell.
Underneath the water is warmed by the earth.
It's bubbling.
Not volcano, but it's earth with that exposure.
And unsurprisingly, I liked seeing the hot springs outside more because the lighting and the ventilation was a lot better. Plus, we were able to see the little spring snails in the water. A fun fact I loved about these snails is that they can use the surface tension of the water to swim upside down underwater. How cool is that?
So how flammable do you think this is? Their adult size is the size of your pinky nail. They only live 1 to 2 years. So yeah, you can catch these guys swimming just here too as well. So there's one there, one there, one there, and one there.
Oh, I see them moving.
Yeah, that's why
And
I'm
there's another
recording.
snail swimming just
That's crazy.
right there.
Imagine, I want to swim like that.
nails?
Yes.
Wow. They have shells? They're moving like these. Is these only?
These are also snails too. They're so tiny. Oh my god, I'm getting one moving right now.
Yeah, these are moving ones.
After that, we hiked along the boardwalk trail and got to see some smaller hot springs and learn more about the history of the site as a bathhouse.
Naturalized. They gave you citizenship. That's what she said. It's naturalized. I'm just like assuming they gave it the fish citizenship. Yeah. Those are just tiny these fish.
I guess the husbands come from
3 kilometers down.
oh the leaves.
Bubble, bubble.
Bubble, bubble.
Bubble, bubble, bubble.
Oh, it keeps on going from up here too.
Probably the most exciting part of the day was seeing some bear cubs on the park grounds. According to the staff, they're known to frequent this area quite a bit, but generally stay away from humans if you stay out of their way. The last part of the day was spent hiking to see Sundance Canyon. It was a very easy hike to the canyon because the roads were well paved. However, the area around the waterfalls was a little bit dicey because the path was steep and made up of lots of loose gravel and rocks, but it wasn't too bad. Day 4 was all Johnston Canyon. I'm glad we started out earlier in the morning because the park got pretty crowded as the day went on. We first saw the lower and upper falls, which were both very pretty. I liked the lower falls more because you were able to go into a little alcove that brought you super up close and personal to the falls. I remember getting sprayed and misted on by the rush of water and found it really fun actually. After seeing the two main falls, we hiked to the inkpots. This hike was tough because the first half was a mix between steep and even steeper uphill, and the second half was the first half but with some downhills sprinkled in. The good news was that this meant this trail wasn't as crowded as the ones to the main falls we saw earlier, and that the hike was totally worth it. The inkpots were incredibly gorgeous once we got there.
We're walking, or not we, I've been walking downhill for forever because we're on the way back from the inkpots. I had to walk up this for an hour, okay? I'm tired.
I'm referring to my journal to write the notes for this voiceover, and apparently on the bus ride back to the hotel, another passenger, it wasn't me or my sister, accidentally dropped a water bottle onto my brother's crotch. He lived, but I'm unsure at what cost. Back at the hotel, we ate some beef brisket made using the barbecue grill that came with the hotel room. Something I found cool was how every single room in this hotel seemed to have a full barbecue grill on the balcony. I'm not complaining or anything, I thought it was great because it meant we could make barbecue to eat after a long day of hiking.
Here, I'll hold this.
No!
Try again. No.
On this day, we saw the other big headliner for Banff, which is Moraine Lake. I mean, just look at this footage. The lake is such a vibrant shade of blue, it doesn't seem real. If I were to compare the two, I feel like Lake Louise was more of a teal color, while Moraine Lake was a cerulean, sometimes electric blue, depending on what angle you are looking at it.
I could be in the middle. I think I overestimated her. Nice.
We ended up renting some canoes to paddle around on the lake, and it was so amazing because we got to get super close to the water and it was even bluer up close, which doesn't seem possible.
Why are you not rowing?
Can we stop for a second?
It also turned out that my siblings and I could not for the life of us row in sync unless we were singing a song, so we ended up having a canoe karaoke session for however long the canoe rental period was.
I Okay, my pants are so wet!
Okay, we're kind of
I'll do them up.
pirates in a boat.
Bruh.
Yeah, they were singing along with us.
Yeah,
That's so nice.
yeah. That's cute. My mind without your smart mouth.
Call us stupid Americans, but we didn't realize our voices would carry so far across the lake. So I think everyone heard us.
You're crazy and I'm out of my mind. Oh, you give me all of you. Oh, you give me all of you.
Side of your boat towards the opponent.
Yep.
Okay?
Okay.
That way your cannons face the opponent.
Yeah.
And you can attack.
Okay.
And the cannons on the front of your ship. And you want the front of their boat pointed towards your side.
The front of their boat pointed to. Okay. Understood.
Most competent naval officers in battle will have the boats facing each other side by side because no one's stupid enough to let the front of their boat be shown.
Wait, is that mom and dad over there?
Oh my god, why are they so close?
They're so tiny. Hold on. Mom and dad!
You need
Is that mom and dad? That doesn't look like mom and dad. Wait. Can we turn? Can we turn first? Can we please turn first? We're heading straight towards another boat. What? Can we please turn? We're heading towards another boat. Okay, fine. We'll just go this way. It's okay. It's okay.
After Moraine Lake, we went back to the town of Banff to walk some of the local trails there. Our first stop was Surprise Corner, which is a viewpoint overlooking a castle on the Bow River.
Oh, look at that, babies. Whoa, it got so blurry all of a sudden.
We didn't end up making it to the official viewpoint because it started pouring rain on us, so we ended up heading back to the hotel instead. For day 6, we explored the Lake Minnewanka area, which ended up being a collection of various lakes and ponds. As became the trend for the tail end of our trip, we ended up getting rained on a couple of times throughout the day. Honestly, I didn't record much this day because I was very tired and PMSing. Even though Lake Minnewanka was the biggest lake we saw that day, I think my favorite was Johnston Lake because one side was lined by a forest, which when paired with the lake created a very scenic view.
This is not a good sign. Oh.
Yeah, we just drove through it.
At the end of the day, my siblings and I watched K-pop Demon Hunters while eating dinner. I actually really liked it, probably even more so because I was fully expecting for it to be straight cringe. Later that night, I spent some time journaling in the bathroom because I didn't want to keep anyone else awake with the light on. On our last day of exploring Banff, we went back to visit Lake Louise to finally walk the Lakeshore Trail. We also hiked the trail to the Plain of Six Glaciers teahouse. To be honest, I wish I had been able to enjoy the hike more, but I was actually pretty miserable for most of it because it was really rainy and my shoes and socks were completely soaked through, and I had to hike 3 hours each way in those conditions. I was also still PMSing, so I was a bit cranky and I had to aggressively listen to an audiobook to keep myself from getting too irritable.
I think we're here. This is the plane. We made it.
The tea house was pretty cute and cozy, all things considered. I got a blueberry tea, but didn't really like it. I actually liked the Kyoto sencha that my sister got more. After hiking for 6 hours to the tea house and back, we went back to Lake Moraine to walk around the lakeshore some more before heading back to the hotel to rest.
There's a double rainbow. See it?
A double rainbow?
Yeah.
The other one's, it's
It's getting more and more vibrant. Play it though.
Having accumulated over 100,000 steps in the past week, it was finally time to head back home. Looking back now, I definitely want to go back and visit Banff again or visit the nearby national parks, which I heard are also very beautiful. But by this time, I was so tired that I just wanted to go home. Despite some hiccups, I really do think that this trip is the best one I've been on yet, right up there with our previous year's trip to Acadia National Park and my solo trip to Boston last spring. If you've made it to this point, I want to thank you so much for sticking around, and I hope that through this vlog I was able to give you at least a taste of how beautiful and wonderful Banff was. Feel free to let me know which attraction caught your eye the most, or if you've already been to them before. And until then, I look forward to seeing you in my next video. Bye!